we'll call the meeting to order and turn it to you to verify who's with us and that we have quorum, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. I can confirm that we do have quorum. Currently absent are Councillors Chappelle and Councillor Osanek. Joining us this evening is also Councillor Holland to speak to one of the applications. We currently have in the meeting Tim Park, Director of Planning Services, James Barr, Manager of Development Approvals, Amy Didrikson, Intermediate Planner, Lindsay Lambert, Senior Planner, Janice Grant, Senior Planner, Brandon Forrest, Director of Business, Real Estate and Environment, Saru Bajwa, Land Development Manager, Marissa Mascaro, Manager of Transportation Infrastructure, and John Henderson, Housing Program Administrator. I myself am Elizabeth Fawcett. I'm the Committee Clerk for Planning, and we also have Blair Johnson joining us as meeting host this evening. We currently have 5 agents with us and 16 members of the public at this time, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So let me welcome everyone. Happy September as we move into the fall here. That's exciting. Things are cooling down. So what we have on the agenda tonight are 2 public meetings and 2 orders of business. So if you're following along, I'm on page 2 of the agenda, and I'm going to read the notice of collection, which outlines how these public meetings work. And I'll leave the comprehensive report section for Vice Chair Hill, who will be doing that part when we get into business items, because I have a conflict, which I'll declare at that time. But page 2, notice of collection for these public meetings. Personal information collected as a result of the public meetings are collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. Persons speaking at the meeting are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. All names, addresses, and opinions, comments, etc. may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Additionally, interested members of the public can email the City Clerk, Ms. Fawcett, who we just heard from, or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services, who is Mr. Park. And usually city staff, their email is their first initial and their last name at cityofkingston.ca, with a few exceptions, but we'll make sure those emails are available. So the first portion of tonight's meeting is to present planning applications in a public forum, as detailed in the public meeting reports. These reports do not contain a staff recommendation, so we're not going to be voting on anything, and no decisions will be made this evening. Following presentations by the applicant, the meeting will be open to the public for comments and questions, and then we'll look to committee if they have any comments or questions. And of course, our visiting counselors who may be joining us are more than welcome to participate as well. And with that, we'll look to the first public meeting, which is for 365 Nelson Street. And who will be presenting at this point? Is that Ms. Brown?
I'm actually going to let Emma present from IBI.
Oh, perfect. Of course. Very fitting. Ms. Stuckey, the chair is yours for the next while we hear from you on this application.
Great, thank you. I'll just wait for this presentation. Great. So good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Stuckey. I'm a land use planner at IBI Group, and we'll be presenting the zoning bylaw amendment for 365 Nelson Street on behalf of Kingston Youth Services. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning of bylaw amendment is to convert the existing building into a 24-bed emergency use shelter. Next slide, please. So 365 Nelson Street is within the urban boundary. It's located on an arterial road and Kingston Transit route. Has an area of 1.7 hectares with 30 meters of frontage on Nelson Street and 18 meters of frontage on Concession Street. So the existing building is a 1-story building with a mezzanine, and it's been formerly used as a garage and most recently a dance studio. Next slide, please. Here are some photos of the site showing the existing building, some of the entrances, as well as the parking areas. Next slide, please. Here are some photos of the surrounding neighborhood. You can see this is looking north down Nelson Street, the existing dwellings that are to the north of the property, the side of the convenience store, on Concession Street, and then looking south towards the Memorial Center in the bottom right corner. Next slide, please. So more details about the proposal. The proposal involves an internal conversion of the existing building to accommodate a 24-bed emergency youth shelter. No external modifications are proposed for the building, and there's a new outdoor amenity area facing Concession Street proposed, as well as office space for Kingston Youth Services. So this building is proposed to be the main office for Kingston Youth Services, and they'll have staff on site, a maximum 6 on site during the day, 3 overnight. There's 9 parking spaces, 2 of which are barrier free. The main access is supposed to be from Nelson Street, with a secondary access on the south side of the building towards Concession. We just want to note that 24 is the maximum number of youth anticipated who'd be using the services, and is based off of Kingston Youth Services numbers on what could be a peak day, but not necessarily 24 people using the facility at all times. And we note that their services are primarily by appointment or for specified programming. So it's not anticipated that there will be high levels of traffic in and out of the building that isn't known and planned for. Next slide, please. So Kingston Youth Services has an agreement with the city to provide emergency shelter for youth ages 16 to 24. The sort of support services that will be provided include a bed, meals, support with basic needs like laundry, clothing, personal hygiene, school supplies, and life skills training. So Kingston Youth Services employs a prevention diversion worker and family mediation worker who will be some of the staff that I had listed available at the property to assist the youth. And as mentioned before, that this address is meant to be the main office and address of record for Kingston Youth Services. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the concept plan. So in orange, the existing building footprint. No changes to the building footprint are made. It's all an internal conversion. In slightly brown color to the south is the proposed amenity space, outdoor amenity space. So again, this is concentrated on the south side of the building. Parking is proposed as is in the gravel and paved area off of Nelson Street. The amenity area was chosen on the south side of the building just to try to mitigate impacts from neighbors, and there's a space there. As well, we understand Kingston Youth Services is exploring the possibility of additional landscaping or programming in this gravel area with the green spaces here as well. One of the options being explored is potentially community garden space. The main entrance is off of Nelson Street with the secondary entrance to the south, and then the parking spaces are shown, and their existing represents the existing conditions. It's all currently a parking area as well. Next slide, please. So in support of this development, studies were prepared. So the first was a noise study, and it found that noise can be appropriately mitigated to control impacts from Concession Street vehicle traffic noise. Servicing, it was found that there's sufficient sanitary and water service capacity for the proposed development. And a phase 1 environmental site assessment assessed the potential presence of environmental impacts. So some of the environmental work is still ongoing. I know members of the public raised concerns. We understand that the environment engineers working on the project have done some test samples and are waiting on the results to confirm if there's any contamination on the site, and are working with the Kingston Environment Department to make sure all of the proper protocols are followed to have people living on the site. Next slide, please. So the proposal is consistent with the intent of the provincial policy statement as it redevelops an underutilized site in an area planned for intensification along an arterial road. It's within the urban growth boundary. It efficiently uses land and resources, does not result in any extension of municipal services, contributes to a range and mix of housing options, and as discussed before, no public health and safety issues are anticipated. Next slide, please. So the property is designated residential in the City of Kingston official plan, and we note that special needs facilities are permitted in the residential designation. So with review with City of Kingston staff, it was determined that the residents of the emergency shelter have specific needs beyond economic needs. They require social support services and family mediation, etc. So consider a special needs facility. It provides socially and community supportive use and will convert an existing structure and provide 24 emergency shelter beds for youth experiencing housing insecurity. Next slide, please. So the proposed development is compatible with adjacent uses. It involves a conversion of an existing structure that is already well integrated into the neighborhood. No external modifications are proposed. So visually, the building exists and will remain the same. The structure itself will remain the same with some improvements as discussed, like the outdoor amenity space, as well as parking. The site meets the functional needs of site users. There's adequate amenity space, parking, and area for residents. The proposed development's consistent with the official plan definition of special needs facility, which is permitted in the residential designation. The proposal will efficiently utilize existing services and infrastructure, so no expansion of services is required. And this will provide 24 emergency shelter beds for youth to help assist with the housing crisis. So based on this, the proposal conforms to the city's official plan policies. Next slide, please. So the zoning for the property under zoning bylaw 8499, which is the bylaw in effect, it's in the 1 and 2 family dwelling zone. And we're proposing that it's put into a site-specific A5 zone. Next slide, please. So the zoning request is to create a new site-specific A5 zone with amended standards to permit the proposed shelter use and office use, recognize the existing side yard setbacks, permit parking in the existing front yard parking lot, recognize the existing driveway width, just recognizing existing conditions needing to reduce the landscape open space requirements, and eliminate the separation distance from other similar facilities in the area. So the proposed development recognizes existing conditions. The existing building's non-compliant with regard to side yard setbacks, is compatible with existing and proposed development as the building's existing and has been there for many years. And are really just looking to recognize these conditions. It meets the minimum amenity area for a shelter with the at-grade patio. And we'll just note that in the new zoning bylaw, emergency shelter, group home, supportive housing, and other such uses are permitted as of right in the new zoning where dwelling units are permitted. Next slide, please. So overall, based on this, it's our opinion that the proposed development is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan, is compatible with surrounding land uses, and represents good planning and is overall in the public interest. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we welcome questions, comments from the public and councillors at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Stuckey. I see Ms. Fawcett has appeared. Would you like to say something, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask if the planner could just give the notice provisions.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act as detailed in the public meeting report. We have received 3 pieces of written correspondence and these should be included in the committee's addendum package. I also received 3 telephone inquiries. In terms of general process, the purpose of the public meeting is for the applicant to present their proposal to the public, the planning committee, and to answer questions from committee and members of the public. Staff have prepared a public meeting report summarizing the proposal. Feedback received this evening will be addressed by planning staff within a future comprehensive report once technical review of the application is complete and staff are ready to make a recommendation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'll look back to the clerk just for a moment. Ms. Fawcett, you disappeared from my screen. There you are. Hi. How many folks do we have with their hands up right now to question or comment on this file?
We currently have 2 hands raised at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is we will do a call for all members of the public. Ms. Fossa, maybe you could explain how to do that and see if anyone else puts up their hand. If not, this would be our only round for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, for anyone who wishes to speak to the current application on the floor, if you could please raise your hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. This is found in the middle of the screen when you move your mouse over the window. Again, if there's anyone who wishes to speak to the current application, please raise your hand in Zoom now so that we may develop the list of speakers. Mr. Chair, we have 5 hands raised at this time.
Okay, perfect. So let's hear from these first 5 individuals. We'll ask everyone to say their name and their address, as I mentioned earlier, and please keep your comments to 5 minutes or under and look to build off one another as opposed to repeat what's already been said. And once we've heard from these 5 folks, we'll look to the proponent and then, if needed, our city staff to comment in reply. Madam Clerk, who's first?
Mr. Chair, through you, first to speak is Alyssa McDonough, followed by Paula Sarah.
Hi there. My name is Lisa McDonough, and I live at 388 Nelson, which is 6 houses up from the proposed site. My question is about the parking and the street parking that we have in general on our street. I don't know if an official traffic assessment was done for this proposed site, but if there's going to be 6 employees on staff in the building, that would only leave 3 proposed parking spots in your parking lot, 2 of which have to be accessible parking, which I'm not sure if the employees need that space or not. But so far on our street, I've lived in my house now for 3 years, and on our street, it's quite busy. The traffic is fast. There is lots of children who play in the road, and there are lots of folks who park on the street, not always in the spots that they need to be parking in. And I just wondered if that would be addressed. If there's overflow parking, where is that going to be going? Where are the people who are going to mediation, family mediation, or these scheduled events at this building, where are they going to be parking? And if they're parking on the street, is the parking going to be enforced, or will there be any sort of traffic calming or proposed traffic amendments made for our street to accommodate this building? And just to go on record, I'm very much excited for this building to be here. And I'm very much happy to be living close to a place that's going to be making a big difference for a lot of young folks in our community. I just worry about our parking situation on the streets, and that those kids that are going to be there are safe when they go into the road, especially on Nelson, when we already have sort of an issue with traffic calming in general on our street. So yeah, that's my question, and thank you. I appreciate you taking my time, or taking the time.
Very good. Thanks so much. And we'll get a response for you in 4 more participants. So Madam Clerk, who's next?
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Paula Sarah, followed by Patricia O'Connor.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me okay? Okay, good. Thank you. Actually, my full name is Paula Sarah Brooks, and I live across the street from Alyssa at 387 Nelson Street. And to run off from Alyssa's points on traffic, traffic is a concern. Also, for myself, I have the laneway that runs right in behind the proposed spot. I sit on the fence of I'm indifferent on the use of the space. I come from a background of family members, children's aid, things like that. So I understand the importance of space for the unhoused and emergencies. My issue is, with nothing seem to be done with the outside of facade of the building, mentally, how can that be good for the youth to be going into something that looks like an old garage? If you're going in for a spot, you're staying residential, it's an old garage. That was actually, until everything took place, was a dance studio. And also with that, Where I'm very scared of, not for the youth that are in, I know that they're going to be safe. It's the activities that I'm quite sure counselors are unaware of because they happen at the wee hours of the morning there's been a change. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of wandering individuals through the wee early morning hours. I'm concerned because, impressionable youth, bad intentioned people circle around and they gather. The Laneway, I have actually seen drug use. It needs to be like, it's kind of like I've sent 2 requests in through my counselor to have it tidied up. There needs to be something more done because right now it is a space that can be hidden. And I'm very concerned about the health and well-being of the individuals that would be in the building. And also what happens with some of the other areas that have been shelters, not making place in judgment. That's not it. But reasonable person says if more than 24 people show up, reasonable person says, I'm going to stay close to the building where if I need help, but that's not necessarily conducive to healthiness when there is, because just around the corner from me, quite sure, dollars to donuts, there's drugs being dealt out of there. So, and because I can see it in here, like I, at this point in time, being a single woman, do not let my dogs out past 8 o'clock at night because of the Laneway and things going on. So it's more the outer and not being it's as long as all safety is taken part, but I honestly do not see how that use of that building can be a proponent to mental health. I apologize. Proper mental health to facilitate a home-like feeling. I'm sorry, an old dance studio is not a home.
All right, thanks very much. And I'll make a general, yeah, you're welcome, no problem. And I'll make a general comment as chair, which is always a fine line for everyone who participates in planning, which is when we talk about zoning and what's appropriate where, we have to be very careful that we don't stray into talking about the people either using the site or maybe even adjacent to it, because that gets into people zoning, which is not allowed and also very problematic. So this is just a light reminder for folks when they're making their comment to keep that in mind, please. Madam Clerk, who's next?
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Patricia O'Connor, followed by Narman Somani.
Hi, good evening. I'm exactly 1 yard away from your proposed building. I'm probably going to be the only one that's going to come on here and be very unhappy about it because I just feel that King's Court is being inundated with help for everybody else. I'm supposed to be one of the vulnerable. I'm closer to death than I am anything else. And yet nobody's worried about my quality of life. We're all worried about everybody else's quality of life. I just don't like the idea of it being there. And I have to agree with some of the other people. We have people wandering. And in case you live in this area, in case you don't know, it's probably people from the hub wandering through our area to get to the warming and cooling center, which we now have just up the street. We also have transitional housing halfway down the street. We have a shelter at the end of the street. How much else can we take? We're one community. There are lots of communities in this city. Why aren't these places going there? I mean, I hear things like, well, they're on a transit route. We only have one transit route in Kingston. That's it, just the one that goes by here. No, my quality of life is going to be impacted with this building, but nobody seems to care about that. I just have to keep paying my taxes. So I would like you to look at this from the residents' point of view. The hub was supposed to make a big difference. Look what happened over there. We already have theft of our vehicles. We have garbage that we have to clean up. We have drug paraphernalia that we have to clean up. I don't see anybody rushing out to help the old lady take care of stuff like that. And now it's going to get worse. And because it's going to be so close to me, I'm now going to lose the enjoyment of my backyard because I'm not going to be able to go out there and spend any quality time. I also am old-fashioned. I hang out clothes. I don't use a dryer. I hang them out to dry. Apparently it's good for the environment. Who knew? And I'm not going to be able to do that now because please don't tell me that these are going to be impeccably mannered people that don't smoke or make noise, because they're not. They're
Miss
going
O'Connor,
to
I'm just going to
dementia.
interrupt there only because of what I just said. I'm not trying to scold, honestly, but when we talk about the residents of the use, that's just not quite fitting here. We can talk about noise, totally fine. We can talk about compatibility and services. Everything else you've said is welcome, but let's just not comment on the people using the site, please.
Okay, but I mean, like, the world is full of people who don't have good manners, not just there. But anyway, there's going to be noise. There's going to be cigarette smoke. Who wants to bring their laundry in out off the line and have it smell like pot smoke or cigarette smoke? And I'm old. I want to enjoy my last few years. I don't want to have to move. I shouldn't have to move. I should be able to enjoy my last years here in my home that I've lived in for 25 years. And I'm against it. I don't think it's the right place for it. We have families, children in this area. It's a very residential area. I just don't think it's the right place to have it. And that is how I feel, because I think Kings Court has supported enough of these places. I think, and we still are. So I think we've done our part. So I'm like I said, I'm probably going to be the only one that's going to not believe in this, but that's just the way I feel.
Well, thanks for coming to express that. And like I said to the others, we'll have opportunity to hear response once we hear from two more folks at this point. Madam Clerk, who's next?
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Narman Somani, followed by James Davis.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Norman Somani, and I own the building and the convenience store next to it. My concern is about safety and security, because we have kids coming and going and buying stuff during the store hours. And sometimes I go to pray in the early morning hours. We have some prayers at around 4 o'clock, and I sort of drive around alone. So I'm a little concerned about the safety and security. And are they going to have a fence around the area there, or how is it going to work out? Because I'm really nervous about these kids. I understand that they need a place to stay, and I appreciate what you are doing. But I have seen when I pass on Montreal Street at the wee hours of the morning, people are all over the place outside in the shelter there. So I'm concerned if they are doing the same thing here and are communicating with people who are smoking and drinking at the wee hours of the morning.
All right, thank you. And then the final person before we hear from the proponent, Ms. Fawcett.
Next to speak is James Davis.
Hi there, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm James Davis. I live at 377 Nelson Street. I just had two questions. The first is to kind of build on what the lady, maybe a couple of speakers before me mentioned about the laneway. I'm just wondering how the outdoor amenity will affect access to the laneway between Concession and First Avenue, and also if there's general provisions, to perhaps tidy up that area or to keep it straight, because there are a lot of issues behind there. And my second point would be kind of in terms of the scope of the facility, how do we ensure, or how are there provisions in place to keep it contained within the property? My big concern being there is the Kingston Youth Cultural Hub at 484 Albert Street. And there's kind of always a lot of trash and, people hanging around outside of the building a lot of the day. So that would just be my concern for this particular site as well. And if there are provisions in place to kind of mitigate those kind of circumstances.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. So Ms. Stuckey, you can talk first in response to what we've heard from the public at this point. And then I'm looking for our staff member, Ms. Didrikson, if you wanted to add to, that's more than welcome.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and questions. So first, her concerns about parking as well as traffic. Just wanted to reiterate that the proposed parking does comply and meet all standards set out in the zoning bylaw. We're not seeking relief for parking, but do hear that there are concerns in the area. So through the technical review process can look to try to maximize the amount of parking on site. And I believe we've done that in this sort of first iteration. But do hear that it's a concern. And then in terms of staffing and drop-in, perhaps I can ask Anne, who's here from Kingston Youth Services, to speak to that once I'm finished going through the planning concerns about staffing. But our understanding is that there's going to be up to 6 during the day. So we are hearing that concerns that 3 spaces for clients to park may not be sufficient. So can flag that one for Anne just to comment on. We understand concerns about safety and security with access of people walking through the property. We can explore through the site plan process different design measures to try to minimize this or concentrate it in a path that sort of is best and away from residential areas. In terms of nuisance complaints from noise from the site, we do note that the patio and amenity space is on the south facing Concession Street, so did choose to locate that as far as possible from the existing residential uses to try to concentrate any resident activity in the designated amenity space. So again, through the right site plan can look through more design options there. In terms of safety and security, again, can look at different measures during the site plan. We understand that there are concerns and have heard concerns about potentially like fencing and designing areas specifically for the users of the site to be able to congregate safely in a way that minimizes nuisances on the neighborhood. Those were the main concerns I heard from a planning perspective. As a planner, again, like the chair said, I'm not able to comment on like the people. So I hope that helps to address your questions. And maybe if Anne's able to speak to sort of the parking issue and if 3 spaces is based on their experience would be sufficient to accommodate all parking needs for the site.
Yeah, Ms. Brown, you're welcome to do that if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity. So yes, I do feel that the parking is adequate. The maximum number of 6 staff on site would be the very maximum. Oftentimes there's maybe only 2 or 3 staff on site. So, and not all of them have cars. When there are clients, not all of them have vehicles either because they, particularly the homeless youth, have no vehicles. And for family mediation people, they may come as a group, as a family, because we're trying to keep them as a family as opposed to them coming in separate methods of transportation. So I do feel that the parking is adequate. I certainly understand the concerns of the neighborhood, of the activity that's going on in the neighborhood. I can tell you that the youth that are at the youth shelter don't leave at night. They're there to sleep. And once they're inside, they're inside. And if they choose to leave, then they're gone. So they're not wandering around throughout the neighborhood. Most of them leave at the same time in the morning, which is 7 o'clock in the morning. We do not allow drugs and alcohol on the site. It is not a safe use zone. We cannot have them because we have many recovering addicts that access our services, so that they need to be in a safe place for them. So I think that kind of addresses the smoking and drugs issue. They're not there during the day. The youth are, it is an emergency shelter. It's not for day use, except for by appointment. So there won't be youth hanging around outside. We do get a number of youth that come throughout the day, particularly at meal times, that are looking for meals. And so at lunchtime, they may show up, collect a meal, and then the youth that are accessing the shelter in the evening also get meals. We do make sure that the youth clean up after themselves. It's a problem everywhere that people like to leave garbage. We don't like to have garbage on our property, so our youth help to pick up after them. I do understand the concerns of Ms. O'Connor, and perhaps we can help her with her issues also. Our staff are trained with dealing with sharps and needles, so if we can be of assistance to her around her property too, we would be happy to help her with that. I understand the complaints about, or the concerns about the laneway. I too am concerned about the laneway because it is in pretty poor condition. We don't own the laneway. We don't have access to the laneway. So we are concerned that for the safety of our youth at accessing the property also because of the condition of the laneway. Happy to work with the community in the best way to make it as safe as possible.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I'm just going to ask a question here as chair to our planner. Could you explain, please, a bit of the process? You mentioned technical review and some of the next steps that come in moving an application like this forward, but perhaps members of the public would benefit from hearing a bit more about what that looks like.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, we staff in various departments like engineering and parks and forestry and planning, review the application through a technical review and provide comments back to the applicant, and then the applicant resubmits a response to those comments and sometimes updates to studies and plans. And then once we're in a position to make a recommendation, we bring a report back to Planning Committee that also speaks to the comments that have come up through the process and how they factored into our analysis. I hope that helps.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. And so just encouragement to folks that we're not at a decision point. As a reminder, tonight is kind of gathering preliminary feedback to then chart that course we just heard. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else that has their hand up at this point?
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, excellent. So we'll look to committee, and I saw Councillor Hutchison. I believe your hand went up. No? Okay, my apologies. Looking for anyone from committee. We also have the district councillor and our friend Councillor Holland here. I don't know if she's on my screen, but I did see it earlier. There we go. Councillor Holland, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the proponents and to members of the public for being here this evening. I have a couple questions on the presentation. The first one, just a question of clarity. So one of the slides towards the end talked about the fact that one of the asks or requests, I guess, is to have to eliminate the separation distance from other facilities, or that relief would be requested. And could you just speak to that a little bit? What facilities you were referring to there? Oh, sorry. And by the way, Mr. Chair, I can go through all my questions if you prefer. I don't know.
You know what? Actually, I should have said, this is my fault, that when we have committee discussion, we actually are allowed to do crosstalk with those. So I'll look for someone to appear on my screen who can answer that for you, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Holland.
Great.
Ms. Stuckey?
There we go. I'm happy to answer that one. Just pulling up the bylaw. So there is a provision in bylaw 8499 that has a provision that sets out a separation distance so that any new crisis care shelter, recovery home, correction residence, detoxification center, residential care facility, community support house, and community home be located over 250 meters from an existing use of that kind. Generally, it is considered, this is sort of original to these bylaws. So just under sort of new planning practices, it's not encouraged to zone for people that way, saying that you have to have 250 meters between a shelter. If you have another shelter, it can't locate beside it. So yes, are looking to eliminate that provision. We'll note that there is no separation in the new bylaw for these uses. But do just under, this is the bylaw in effect, so as a technicality, do need to request relief for this provision.
Great, thank you. I think the next two are also planning related, or from Ms. Stuckey. So I'll start then. The amenity space on the diagram. Sorry, I wasn't able to have a good close look at it, but the height of the fence there, has that been confirmed at this point, or are we still, is that part of site plan? And then the second question, actually, because it's kind of similar, I guess, or related to the amenity space. Given that this is a special needs facility under the existing zoning, are there other amenity spaces associated with such properties in that we can point to just as an example? Because I think that's sort of part of what's new here is we're looking for the zoning relief, but we're also looking at having this this outdoor amenity space in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood.
Sure, so I'm happy to speak to that. So the height of the fence, that would be confirmed through the site plan process. At this time, I don't know the dimensions. Haven't seen the construction details, haven't been advanced to that point, but we can happily provide it or discuss like options if needed. And then in terms of the amenity space, I think it's comparable. I'd compare it to like outdoor amenity space for example, if this were to be like an apartment building, it's just an outdoor area, patio space that residents are able to use. I personally don't have an example I can think of for a comparable shelter use. But again, can provide more sort of details in the site plan as well as the plan going forward, just to help sort of give the public and neighbors a really clear idea of what exactly like is included there. My understanding is that it's meant to be like an outdoor patio space, potentially with some seating. Yes, I hope that helps to answer. And
Councillor Holland, you're good? All right, thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions, but first a comment. I know that there's some concern about disruption with youth in the area. I just want to remind both the committee and members of the public, we're supposed to focus on land use planning only in the planning process. We have bylaws, we have other things to take care of those other issues. The Human Rights Committee, many years ago, ruled that you cannot make zoning decisions based on the people who are living there. So just a reminder about that. Quick question to the proponents. Is there any plan to do something with the outside of the building? It's not the most appealing building to look at. And it's right across from the Memorial Center Park, which is in my district. So I'm just hopeful that in this process, the building will look better at the end of the process.
I think I see Miss Brown's hand there.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to respond to that question. Yes, I would like the outside of the building to look much better. I'm hopeful that down the road, when we have the interior addressing the needs of the youth, that we can involve the youth in how they would like the building to look, so that they feel welcomed and that this is their space.
Thank you. And my last comment has to do with, there was a comment made earlier by a member of the public about the impression that all such things are going into Kings Court. I live in Kings Court, but I represent Williamsville. And there are in Williamsville, in Kings Court, and in Councillor Hutchison's district, in the core of the city, we have a lot of those type of supportive housing and other things. So it isn't just happening in Kings Court, and I just wanted to make that point. And my final point is that we've had ones in Williamsville where people have been really apprehensive and opposed at the beginning, and the same has happened in Kings Court. And then within a year, the neighbors have accepted those shelters and those other things. And I'm happy to see or hear that there's going to be a number of staff, adequate staffing there that I think can address a lot of those things. And if the staff were to do an outreach and talk to some of the neighbors and introduce themselves, that would be a very positive thing, I think. So,
thank you, Councillor Neal. Very good. And I've seen no other hands. I'll give committee one last call here. There's Councillor Hutchison. After you, sir. But we can't hear you.
Okay, I kept clicking on the mute, but it wouldn't go away. My question has to do with the way that the property comes down to Concession Street, and you've got some parking going in the top, the northern part of that. Are you going to do anything to beautify that, improve that gap in the streetscape there? I'm hoping. It's been there forever, but you know, do you have any plans in that regard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand Kingston Youth Services is looking at potentially programming this space with a community garden or something similar, maybe more landscaping. So they are, yeah, looking to make improvements on that area and look to program it to meet the needs of the users and potentially a community partnership.
I see. Can Ms. Brown have anything to say to that?
Just to echo what Emma has said, part of the suggestions from the city staff have been to work with the engineers to develop more access for trees, planting of trees, which I would be very happy to accommodate. And yes, that does look not as nice off the Concession Street, and I would like to have that beautified because I do want it to be welcoming and nice for not just our youth, but for the community too.
Thank you very much. That's my only question.
Perfect. All right, so I've seen no other hands. That will conclude this public meeting. Thank you to everyone who participated. And next we'll move to our second public meeting. So I won't read the notice of collection again because the same process stands. But this meeting is for 3001 Clogs Road. And that's on page 5 of your agenda, if you're following. And there's the the report that goes with it as well. And I see Ms. Lambert, who's here to talk to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I can confirm that notice was given for this application in accordance with the Planning Act, as detailed in the public meeting report. We have received 2 pieces of correspondence, the first of which appears in the main agenda and the second in the addendum to this evening's agenda. The purpose of the public meeting is for the applicant to present their proposal to the public and planning committee and to answer questions from committee and members of the public. Staff have prepared a public meeting report summarizing the proposal. Feedback received this evening will be addressed in a future comprehensive report once all the technical review is complete and the application and staff are ready to make a recommendation on the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who will be giving the presentation? Mr. Leclerc.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the committee and everyone from the public that's here. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a planner with FO10 Planning and Design, and I'll be presenting this application this evening. I am joined by my colleagues, Alex Cleve, and by Kyle Nielsen, who is the civil engineer on the project. So the subject site is 3001 Clogs Road. This is an application for draft plan of subdivision that is being brought forward on behalf of the city itself. Next slide, please. Our subject site is in the west end of the city, south of the 401, west of Gardner's Road. It's a property that's about a little over 21 hectares in area. It's bounded by Clogs Road to the north and Creekford Road to the south. There are a range of uses in proximity to the site. So to the immediate west, north, and northeast are privately serviced residential uses. Across Creekford Road to the south is a residential subdivision that's serviced. And then to the southeast of the site are a range of industrial type of uses, including a former quarry. The land itself is largely undeveloped, although as you can see from this aerial image on the screen, a portion of the lands are currently being farmed and have been for some time. Next slide, please. The lands are designated business park industrial in the official plan, which is what's shown on this slide in blue. That designation came out of the City of Kingston's employment land strategy that was undertaken back in 2015 as a background study to the previous official plan update. So that study recommended that these lands be designated, and when the official plan was updated in 2017, it did incorporate that recommendation. There is also a site-specific or special policy area that applies to these lands. That's policy number 61, which allows existing residential and agricultural uses to remain in place, recognizing that although the lands are designated for business park uses, there are a number of existing residential uses in the vicinity. Next slide, please. Following the official plan update, the city undertook a secondary plan exercise for these lands. The number of background studies were undertaken, natural heritage, archaeological, and there was a development of a concept plan that came out of that, as well as being presented at an open house back in May of 2018. This is the plan that was presented at the time. This plan shows a range of land uses for the subject site, as well as some adjacent properties that are city owned in particular, identifying some lands as being for employment use, identifying existing residential lands, the need for some green buffer. There was a conceptual road drawn. This plan was very much conceptual in nature and was taken to the public for consultation and input. That secondary plan exercise culminated with a recommendation to planning committee and ultimately to council to proceed with development applications for the land. So sort of take the recommendations that have been provided and go the next step. And the reason for that is that there was a recognition that the determination of the appropriate land uses and the precise definition of various features such as the buffer would need to be defined, as well as the road would need to be defined through further technical study, which would be requirements of those planning applications. So planning applications were brought forward in 2019 for draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment. At that time, those applications actually included both the subject site as well as a parcel on the east side of Clogs Road. Through that process, and as a result of unforeseen interest in the east parcel, the application has been revised. And we are now looking only at the west parcel of land as part of this draft plan of subdivision. Next slide, please. One of the outcomes of that interest in these lands was that the land was zoned through a minister's zoning order earlier in 2022, which is why we're not proposing a zoning bylaw amendment at this time. The land is already zoned for a business park as a result of this. That minister's zoning order applied 2 zones to this parcel, a business park zone, which applies to the majority of the lands, which allows a range of business park uses. It also, again, in recognition of the proximity of residential uses, incorporates enhanced setbacks for some of those, for lands that are adjacent to residential uses or residential zones. There are also enhanced restrictions around open storage in proximity to residential uses. Finally, the zoning applied an open space zone on a portion of the lands that's shown here in gray, and I'll speak more about what that was implementing and why it was implemented in a moment. Next slide, please. So following the direction to move from a secondary plan to technical applications, to planning applications, the development of the plan itself that's being presented this evening was refined, and there were a number of factors that fed into the refinement of that plan from the original concept plan that had been presented through the secondary plan exercise. And there were 6 goals or principles that fed into the refinement of that plan. Those are all shown on this slide here. So one of those that's critical from an industrial lands perspective, employment lands perspective, is flexibility in parcel size. The market demands a wide range of parcel sizes, and providing a little bit of flexibility is critical to the configuration of the subdivision itself. Another factor that was identified as being important both to the community and to the technical studies and policies is the preservation of natural heritage features on these lands. So technical studies were undertaken, a natural heritage assessment that built on several, I believe there were 4 natural heritage assessments completed previously. It built on those assessments and identified the need for a buffer from the nearby Collins Creek wetland, as well as from the top of slope that passes diagonally through the lands, and an existing water course on the west side. There are also development guidelines that have to be factored in, and technical requirements, such as, for example, a limit on the length of a cul-de-sac, which requires that the road be a through road that connects from Creekford all the way to Clogs Road to the north. Land use compatibility was another factor that was incorporated into the design of the blocks themselves, to ensure that lots adjacent to residential uses would be sufficiently sized to accommodate appropriate buffers and setbacks that would be reflected in the zoning. Public comments and public feedback through that secondary plan exercise sort of tie all of these other factors together and are reflected in the plan as well. And site constraints such as the topography and those natural heritage features and other considerations of that nature were also factored into the plan, the plan's refinement. Next slide, please. So all of those factors contributed to the plan that you see on this slide here. This is the plan that's being proposed. This is the plan of subdivision with 15 business park blocks shown in purple. And then we have 3 shades of green. We have a dark green at the north of the site, which represents the stormwater pond that's necessary to service these lands. We have a sort of a medium green that runs sort of in a linear fashion diagonally, largely along the side of Street A, which is the proposed road. And that sort of extends and wraps around the southwest corner of the site down to Creekford, which is where an existing water course is located. And that buffer is a 15-meter buffer from the top of the slope. So there's a ridge that runs down from that top of slope down towards Clogs Road. So that there's a 15-meter buffer from the edge of that sort of top of slope line, which is what's captured largely in that buffer. And then the land effectively from the top of that slope all the way down to Clogs Road is undeveloped land that's proposed to remain undeveloped. There's no development is proposed on those lands. And that comes out of the recommendations of the Natural Heritage Study that recognizes that there is a provincially significant wetland to the northwest, and maximizing any setback from the business park development is critical to ensuring that no negative impacts occur to that provincially significant wetland. So that whole open space buffer and undeveloped portion is implementing that recommendation of providing an enhanced buffer. And you can see as well on this plan the creation of a road, that's Street A, that would link Creekford and Clogs to the north. Next slide, please. I've mentioned a few times that there are a number of supporting studies. I've spoken about the natural heritage assessment that was undertaken and has been through some technical review. We also had a traffic impact study prepared, a noise impact study, a number of civil engineering studies and reports looking at water servicing, sanitary, stormwater drainage. A planning report or a demonstration report was prepared, as were urban design guidelines. And these have all been and are currently being reviewed by city staff and by other review agencies. This is another version of the plan, just showing the plan itself overlaid on an aerial image of the property. Next slide, please. So the plan that we're presenting this evening is consistent with the PPS. It helps fulfill direction that came out of the employment land study around the contributing to the supply of employment lands in the city of Kingston. There's a recognition at that time that there was a need to bring in more lands. This is an obligation under the provincial policy statement. Through the secondary planning exercise, in consultation with the real estate group, there was a recognition that those lands are being developed and being purchased faster than they're being brought online. So there's an urgent need to bring these lands online and fulfill that provincial guideline. This plan of subdivision conforms to the official plan. It conforms and complies with the zoning that applies on the lands today, and represents good land use planning, in our opinion. Next slide, please. And with that, Mr. Chair, I welcome any questions or comments from the committee and from the public.
Very good, thank you. And we've already heard confirmation from the planner about reporting, etc. So I'll look to the clerk for individuals who have their hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I will note that we still have 15 members of the public with us at this time. So again, if there's anyone who wishes to speak to the current application on the floor, if you could please raise your hand in Zoom so that we may call on you. Again, this is located in the center of the screen when you move the mouse over the Zoom window. Again, we'll just ask that any member of the public who wishes to speak, if you could please raise your hand so that we can build a list of speakers that we may call through. I'm just seeing one hand at this time, Mr. Chair, so we'll go to Jeff Sanderson.
5 minutes and your name and address, please.
Yeah, if you can hear me, my name is Jeff Sanderson. I live at 2904 Clogs Road, which is the original homestead of the Clogs family. It's dating back to the 1800s, and all this land we're talking about was at one point theirs. It's not now. It's not mine now. I want to thank you for all you're doing for the city. I know it's not easy, and I do appreciate it. And I don't really disagree with this full development at all. I understand the city is growing. Still a lot of land south of the 401 and all the rest. I had sent in a letter. It had 3 sort of questions. I'm going to focus mostly on one. Number 1 was the concern of my well water, because I live on the north side of Clogs Road. The storm water facility is scheduled to be put in place about 50 meters from where my well is. So there's a lot of land we're about to pave on the east side and west side, a lot of runoff potentially, and I just am concerned about what a stormwater facility is. I have is it a facility? Is it a building? Is it a pond? How much trickles into the groundwater, that sort of stuff. I don't have that knowledge, so maybe somebody can enlighten me. I can deal with the fact that the sitting on my porch isn't going to look the same as I look across the road. I can deal with that. I just want to know when I turn on the tap that I'm drinking decent water. Thanks for that introduction there. Actually, I learned a little bit looking at that picture as well. I'm wondering, I'm going to go off topic a bit here because I was only going to talk about the well. The ridge of land that is undeveloped, the green space that goes all the way across, doesn't end at block 15. It continues all the way across to the other side of Clogs Road and all the way out to Gardner's Road. So I'm wondering about why the decision was to sort of arbitrarily end it at what would be my neighbor's house, put the stormwater in and develop another piece of land. And why not, I guess, develop it, leave that green space all the way across to potentially across Clogs Road all the way to Gardner's Road and have a bigger buffer zone for that wetlands that was talked at. I know you've done lots of studies. I'm not heritage studies and all the rest. I'm not privy to that knowledge. So I guess my biggest concern too is my well water and the protection of the Collins Creek watershed. And if the city should not extend that sort of buffer zone, it only would mean the loss of 1 development land out of the 17 or so. So yeah, I guess those are my 2 concerns. I started with 1 and ended up with 2. Sorry about that. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks very much. Nothing to apologize for. Right on topic, right on land use planning, and in only half the time. So thanks for that comment, or those comments, I should say. Madam Clerk, I don't see any other hands. Do you?
I do not, Mr. Chair. I do not see any further hands.
Okay, perfect. So we'll look to Mr. Leclerc, there he is, to respond, and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments from the gentleman. With respect to well water, the stormwater management facility is intended to be a pond that would provide for quality and quantity control of stormwater flows coming from the road that would be created through the subdivision itself. The application also includes the creation of a master drainage plan that provides sort of allocations and identifies how each of the individual lots must be drained at a very high level. And I would turn it over to Mr. Nielsen, our civil engineer, to provide maybe a brief note about the design of a pond.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Kyle Nielsen from engineering. So we're the civil engineers on this project. So there's two pond designs contemplated. There's a wet pond type facility or a dry pond with an oil grit separator. Both type of facilities are actually clay lined. They're not infiltration type facilities. Because of the nature of the upstream area, the amount of imperviousness, there'll be very little water infiltrating from these sites into this into the area, and we don't anticipate any well impacts. Given these sites, first of all, won't be taking up any of your groundwater demand, as they'll be on municipal services, and then also is the elevation of this site compared to your site. Even any excavations, it won't be near the groundwater levels, so we don't anticipate any well impacts.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. And the second question had to do with the continuation of the ridge, that it continues further east beyond where we have it shown on the plans. While it does continue to some degree, it does begin to flatten out from the point where we have it shown. The natural heritage impact or natural heritage assessment effectively identified where we have it shown as the edge of where it has significant benefit from a natural heritage buffering from Collins Creek's wetland. So the reason we have it shown there is to implement the recommendation from the natural heritage assessment in terms of the limitation of the benefit from incorporating that setback into the plan.
Okay, thank you very much. And I didn't see any of our staff pop up, so we'll move to committee then. And we'll look for questions or comments from councillors, ideally questions, because we're in a public meeting. There's no recommendation, so just trying to get some more information here. Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Mr. Leclerc. So I was happy to hear you say, like, my one question was going to be where it's block 17 open space, but it's divided into like dark green, light green, and there's undeveloped land. So my one question was going to be, does that mean they're going to be developed in the future? But I heard you say that that's all going to be saved and preserved. And that's correct, right? That's what you did say.
Through Mr. Chair, that isn't in accordance with the recommendation from the Natural Heritage Assessment, that there's no development proposed through this process.
Great. Okay, so then, so where it's like a darker green, which is that open space buffer you talked about, right? Which I guess is on top of the ridge. Is that going to be saved, or is it called open space because all the trees are going to be taken down there to build some sort of pathway? Like, is that open space at the top still going to be preserved?
Through Mr. Chair, it will be preserved. That open space is intended to be a protected buffer that would allow no development, no construction, no site alteration. So its purpose is to protect the existing vegetation that's there for its buffering purposes.
Okay, thank you. That makes me very happy. So that means like a sidewalk or a pathway through the business park would be on the south side then of the road, eh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the road allowance may allow the creation of a pathway along the north side of the road, but it would be within the road allowance itself.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, and thank you to Lindsay Lambert, right? I thank you, Lambert. Thanks very much, Lindsay, for just sending the aerial overview, like the overlay of all the buildings on top of the forest. And Mr. Leclerc, I saw that was in one of your slides, which you showed tonight, but we didn't have in our package. And so thank you for doing that, because that really gives the good picture of what I'm interested in, which is where the trees are and the forest and the building. So that was really good. So the only thing then that I would have to say is maybe for block 4, I think it is. Let me see. Block 4. First of all, so in the EIA, the environmental impact assessment, I did see that option number 3 is that as the city builds this, they only cleared the trees as the lot gets, has interest in actually being purchased, right? So that was option 3. Don't clear cut the entire site, just do it as interest in the lots comes up. And so for block 3, for example, you can see along Creekford Road that it's already like half is cleared and half is trees. So I hope that option 3 would stay that way. It's only when there's a potential buyer that then the trees at the back might be cleared, or maybe the potential buyer would only use 3/4 of the building lot of lot 3, because they might want to, save some of the trees along the edges of lot 3. And then when it comes to lot 4, if lot 4 could be, all preserved, which would be what the CRCA and the EIA suggested of, again, option 3, leaving the trees, because we have block 4, which is like fully treed. And if there was supportive council whenever this starts to come back, to maybe even save block 4 just to add to the natural heritage, then I'd be all for that. So those are my comments. And I don't know if there's a question in there, but I did read in the EIA, and it was supported by the CRCA, that option 3 in terms of land clearing, it only gets cleared if there are trees on the lot once there's interest, and it goes further into the development.
Mr. Leclerc, do you care to comment or respond in any way?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to acknowledge the councillor's comment that option 3 of the that was recommended in the HIA is the preference. I don't believe there's been any decisions made thus far in terms of which options would be applied, but certainly staff from the real estate group are on the call this evening, and the councillor's preference is very duly noted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. Just one quick question, because this has been identified as employment lands for some time. Is it accurate that the lots are now fully serviced? Because I know the city always prioritized the servicing of employment lands. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a great question. The lands are not serviced yet. The purpose of this draft plan of subdivision application is to allow them to be serviced. It would allow the creation of the road and the establishment of the various infrastructure, sanitary, water, storm, that's necessary to service those lands.
Good. And that servicing, those costs will be borne by the proponents of the development, not by taxpayers. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the lands will be serviced in accordance with typical subdivision requirement processes. So the developer will bear the cost of servicing the land.
Thank you. My taxpayers will appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Through Mr. Chair, I do want to note though that the city is the developer in this instance. For absolute clarity. Trying to skirt that, but that is the situation.
So my taxpayers will be paying in part for this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Neal. I saw no other hands, so I'm happy to go back to Councillor Osanek. Go for it.
Thank you. I just skipped over one question, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask, so block 18 is just like very tiny. And so I just wanted to ask Mr. Leclerc, what's the difference between block 18 and then the big block 17 of open space?
Through Mr. Chair, that's a question that we're actually working to resolve at this point in time through our next submission, is that the block 18 is an artifact of previous iterations of this plan. And when the minister's zoning order went through, block 18 was included with the rest of the open space buffer to prohibit any type of business park development on that lands. And what we're anticipating to do through sort of a final submission is to adjust the block to incorporate it with the rest of the lands. And effectively what we'll likely look at doing is separate the undeveloped land from the open space land. So what we'll do is we'll still have two blocks there. We'll have block 17 and 18, but likely block 17 will be the open space lands, the protected buffer, and block 18 would be the lands to the north, that undeveloped land. So it would just be a more clear delineation between those two lands.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, seeing no further movement, we'll conclude this public meeting with thanks again to all who participated. And we'll move right away into Planning Committee meeting 19 of this year. And I'll call the meeting to order. What time is it here? It's just before 7:20, so I'll wait until it is and say it's 7:20, which is excellent. I'll look for a mover and seconder for approval of the agenda with the addendum. Councillor Neal, Councillor Hutchison, all those in favor? That passes. Confirmation of minutes. There are 2 minutes that are before us tonight from the 4th and the 11th. A mover and seconder for that. Hutchison and Hill. Seeing no edits or comments, all those in favor? That passes. I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest, so Councillor Hill, you might as well take the chair.
Thank you, and I'll take the chair, and I'll start just by noting that this is a conference. I'll do the notice of collection. The second portion of tonight's meeting is to consider comprehensive reports. These reports do contain a staff recommendation, and the recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. After the planner's presentation, committee members will be able to ask questions of staff, followed by members of the public. Following the question and answer period, this committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council, who has final say on the applications. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So if you'll notice on the business portion of the meeting here tonight that we have 2 items, but they are dealing with the same application, same project. So we're going to combine those for the purpose of discussion and ultimately for the purpose
Councillor
of our
Hill, sorry
vote.
to interrupt you. I'm just going to point of order you just for 1 second because I should officially declare my conflict, and also I think you have to go through the briefings and just a few other points. So sorry to be pedantic, but just for good practice. So I'll just say it formally that I, Robert Kyler, the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my potential pecuniary interest in business items A and B, or they're going to be combined tonight. As my mother, I have immediate family, works for the corporation who's making the owner application on this file. Thanks, and I'll see you later.
All right, so I'm sorry, I'll turn to the clerk, maybe just, are we on track here? We have the disclosure of peculiar interest, and is that where we're at on the agenda here now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Through you, I will just note that we do not have any delegations or briefings this evening, so we can just turn to the city's planner to do the presentation at this time.
Perfect, and we'll turn to our planner, which is Ms. Grant. Ms. Grant, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? All good? Perfect. I'll try and make this relatively quick. I know we've talked about this item a couple of times before, but I will just provide a little bit of a presentation just to bring kind of everyone up to speed on what's happened since our last meeting. So for those who don't know me, my name is Janice Grant, and I'm a senior planner with the city. Tonight I'll be speaking to an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for the property at 1200 Princess Street. This site is home to the mother house for the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. So the subject lands are located on the south side of Princess Street, west of the Sir John A intersection. They are approximately 9.5 hectares in size with significant frontage on Princess Street, as well as additional frontage on the terminus of Fairview Road and Phillip Street. The site does not have any frontage onto Elmwood Street further to the south. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. So to remind everyone, the redevelopment of the site as proposed will accommodate the relocation of the existing Providence Manor, which is located downtown on Montreal Street. That site has 256 long-term care beds. The purpose and effect of the application before us today is to introduce a new long-term care facility, as well as a parking structure with complementary commercial uses to facilitate the development of a new 6-story, 320-bed home, which would provide a net increase of 64 beds in the community. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. So the committee and the public will remember that at their May 5th meeting, staff had presented a recommendation for approval of the zoning bylaw amendment application. At that meeting, we had a number of residents of Fairview Road who had expressed concerns regarding the traffic impact study, which was associated with the proposal at that time. And that study recommended utilization of the existing Fairview Road access as a controlled egress for staff members of the home. In response to those comments, Planning Committee decided to pass a motion to defer the application in order to allow planning and transportation staff to consider the comments further and to look at alternative access options and report back to the committee with those. So the applicant has now prepared a revised traffic impact study and a functional drawing, which is what you see here. And these are both now to the satisfaction of our transportation services staff. The revised materials propose an alternative traffic approach, which involves a reconfiguration of the existing Princess Street access on the site to accommodate the traffic that will be generated from the long-term care home. And the reconfiguration that you see here includes a widening and a realignment of the existing driveway, the introduction of a redesigned traffic island on the site, as well as an elongation of the existing road median on Princess Street, and this would functionally restrict left turns from the site. The traffic study, for clarity, no longer proposes that Fairview Road be utilized as a controlled egress to accommodate traffic from staff of the long-term care home. So it would be, as proposed, maintained as it functions today. I wanted to highlight a couple of items in response to some of the correspondence that committee has in front of it tonight in both the minutes and I believe the addendum. And we also do have the applicant's consultants as well as city transportation staff on the line to answer any questions that the committee and the public may have following my presentation. So I will do kind of my planner overview of this, and if there's more in-depth questions, then the applicant is happy to answer those. And from the city's perspective, we also have traffic staff on the line. So first, we received some questions regarding the physical changes that are proposed to Princess Street and the appropriateness of the approach to restrict left turns and through movements from the site onto Princess Street. So just wanted to provide some background on that, because I know that technical studies can be very long and a lot of numbers and sometimes hard to get through. So this approach is a result of the technical analysis of the traffic consultant, which identified that the provision of a left turn only egress onto Princess Street is required in order to provide an acceptable traffic condition on the site. So without this, I think the lineup times on the site to get out of the site were upwards of, I think, 12 or 15 minutes, which was deemed unacceptable. Various options were reviewed through that analysis, with the current recommendation ultimately being the only one that was supported by the traffic consultant from a technical perspective. The changes to the site access and the median on Princess Street that you see in this drawing here in front of you are those practical changes that are needed in order to implement the recommendation of the traffic impact study. And it's important to note that this limitation of egress to Princess Street has always been the recommendation of the study. And that was one of the reasons that a controlled additional egress to Fairview was originally proposed prior to the most recent submission we're seeing tonight, which modifies the Princess Street access instead. We also received a question from a member of the public related to the ongoing functionality of the plaza to the north. The functional changes to the roadway will not impact the existing egress nor ingress of Peachtree Plaza. So the existing movements that plaza has access to onto Princess will continue to function. The traffic consultant also reviewed the impact of the flows generated from the long-term care home development to that plaza on a business as usual scenario. So if the development was not to happen, and ultimately concluded that these flows generated from the long-term care home will not result in adverse impacts to that property beyond which would be seen anyways in a business as usual scenario. We also received questions regarding the appropriateness of a traffic light at the site's intersection with Princess Street. So a traffic signal was considered at this location as part of the technical work completed by the consultant. That work ultimately identified that the volumes generated from the proposed development did not meet the warrant for a signal here, and that's in accordance with provincial guidelines that the traffic engineers follow. Members of the public have referenced the proximity of the intersection to the existing lights. However, I just want to highlight for everyone that proximity is not the reason why the traffic consultant has determined that a signal is not supported by the study. That is rather related to the volumes. And finally, we have also heard comments related to future development and potential traffic approaches for those. The current submission relates to the long-term care home and the parking garage only, and thus this is the information that the technical assessment has reviewed that has been submitted with this application. Any future redevelopment of the lands with other uses would require additional traffic analysis at the time of the application to review those flows, and appropriateness of other approaches to accommodate additional traffic identified by potential future development would be reviewed and determined at that time in consultation with traffic staff. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. So just as a summary of our position here tonight, so staff continue to recommend approval of the zoning bylaw amendment as it represents good land use planning, complies with applicable provincial and local planning policy, is supported by technical analysis, and will facilitate the introduction of an updated care facility in the community. So just for clarity, we are recommending approval of the bylaws which were contained in the original comprehensive report to Planning Committee on May 5th, and that is linked in tonight's supplemental report, so public and members of the committee can access that. And securement of the detailed design work related to the entrance modifications will be further reviewed and then secured through the site plan control process in consultation with our transportation staff expertise. So that is all from me today, and I apologize, that was a lot of information, but just wanted to provide kind of some upfront responses to those comments so that we have them. And I will pass it over to the committee, but we are available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. So just to let folks know how this will work, we will entertain questions and comments from committee and from the district councillor who's joined us tonight, Councillor McLaren. And then we'll give the public an opportunity to comment prior to requesting a mover and a seconder to get the recommendation on the table for a vote and final comments from committee. So we will start with questions from the committee. Are there any questions from committee? I'm not. Oops, Councillor Hutchison.
Yes, I just want to clarify a couple of things. Thanks for the presentation. That did make the technical studies supplied was a bit of a pull to get through. First thing is when it talks about, this is Ms. Grant, restricted left-hand turn. It appears to me, well, never mind how it appears to me. Does that mean it's limited by traffic condition or is not possible?
Ms. Grant?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm not sure I understand the question. The question was, will those turns be physically restricted?
Yeah, that's what the redesign does to some extent, is talked to in the report. But what's unclear to me is the definition of restricted in this situation. Does going north out of the Providence Village, does that mean you cannot make a left-hand turn? Or does it mean that you may have to wait some time to do it? Because I can see that according to the diagram or the layout supplied, it's possible. Advisable, I wouldn't know, but so I'm just wondering what's actually restricted means in this instance.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start and then I will allow transportation staff to jump in if they have any further comment. But the intent right now is the drawing that has been reviewed as part of the supporting information at this stage is demonstrating feasibility. So the final details of how that will be physically restricted will be all those details ironed out through the site plan control. But right now the intent is that the pork chop on the property, as well as the extended median on Princess Street, would physically restrict left turns out of the property. Of course, if people make decisions outside of that to go the wrong way on Princess Street, that's not part of the planning technical review. But from a technical perspective, the implementation of the pork chop and the elongated median would functionally restrict those movements.
Thank you. Ms. Mascaro, did you want to jump in there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, yeah, I just wanted to add to what Janice just noted. So the intention is to physically prevent those movements from happening. Obviously, people can make efforts to do so. Previous iterations of the study had actually considered not physically restricting it, but just signing it as not permitted. That's where we get into concerns, because if it's just signed, you can still kind of very effectively make that effort. So this redesign, which introduces physical measures to prevent it, is what's effectively getting us to restricting those movements.
Thank you. Back to you, Councilor Hutchison.
Yeah, so that definition of restricted means prohibited to me. And which is different than limiting something, because when you limit something, you don't normally say you've prohibited it. And on the diagram, I was just trying to point out, it looks like you can make a left-hand turn there. So, and I thought it was mentioned by Ms. Grant that was that the traffic consultant thought that was necessary. So my concern is this: people are going to come out of there, and if they have to go right, even though they want to go west, that's going to cause some trouble, it seems to me. And perhaps I can explain to me how much trouble at Princess Street and McDonell, where they go down, go to Sir John A. Macdonald, go right down to Bath Road or up the concession, and then they go home. I can't imagine they're going to be very happy about that. So I'm trying to get some clarity about what is actually happening. It seemed to me that Ms. Mascaro said, no, we're not going to physically allow that to happen, even though there appears to be a left-hand turn there.
Is that a question, Councilor Hutchison? Do you want a response to that?
Yeah, I want.
Okay. Ms. Mascaro?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the island that has been designed in accordance with provincial and federal guidelines for how we would expect a driveway configuration to be built to restrict left turns. So it's been designed in accordance with the principles for that, both with the pork chop that's created as well as with the extension of the median. So it does meet design requirements for restricting those movements.
Okay. Okay. So it seems clear to me that you'll be coming out of Providence Village. You will not be able to cross the road to the Peachtree. You'll have to go around. Is that correct?
That's correct. You would only be able to go right out of the 1200 Princess Street site.
And in the previous reiteration of this design, were left-hand turns possible? And was driving across the road to the Peachtree possible? Allowed is a better word.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the traffic study has always recommended right out only turns from Princess Street. So
Yes.
the reason, just to provide some background, the reason why the secondary egress to Fairview Road was recommended in the beginning was to allow a westerly kind of easier way of traffic from the site. But in response to the deferral motion, that has been removed from the recommendation, which would maintain just the one right out only from Princess Street.
So the first part of what you said, I thought was the case, that left-hand turns are not in the works regardless.
Yes, exactly.
So that clarifies things for me immensely. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions from committee? All right, I'm going to look to Councillor McLaren. I know that Councillor McLaren wanted to make some comments. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank staff for, first of all, putting in this extra work over the summer and actually satisfying the needs of the Fairview residents so that it maintains the street only as emergency access. They are very thankful and they've communicated that to me yesterday. The biggest concern that they have is that this may continue. This may be revisited in a number of years when the development goes on further. And I guess the big question I have is, it was mentioned that it wasn't the distance between lights that suggested that the light was not appropriate at this time, but volume. If there is development in the future, and the volume increases, would it be possible to put a light there and still maintain Fairview closed except for emergencies?
Ms. Grant?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So any future development that came in for the site that proposed additional volumes would have to provide a traffic impact study similar to this one, and that would provide the recommended approach for traffic. So that may include a traffic light on Princess Street. I would not speculate as to what a traffic consultant would recommend, but that may be something that comes out of those traffic studies, and that would be something that the city would review at that time.
Okay, thank you. And two other suggestions that were made by the public at that point were extending the road up towards the Homestead Waverly building, just sort of upstream Princess Street. Is that a viable option under certain circumstances?
Ms. Grant?
Yes, thank you, and through you. That property is privately owned, so that would not be something that the city would be in a position to put a road through at this time. If there were cooperation between private property owners and formal easements were established, that may be a possibility, but that would be something that would need to be presented as part of a future development application for review.
Thank you. And the third option that was also suggested was going through Crossfield United Church. You have a road that goes right to their property. And if there's an easement that could be made with them, would that be a possibility as well?
Similarly, through you, from the Homestead site, those are private properties, so that would be discussions between private property owners, and we would review those as they came in terms of how feasible those might be.
Great. So the biggest concern that I've been hearing is when the increased volume comes along, residents are very interested in making sure that a light is one of the options. And I hope that I can work with staff in the new term, if I'm here, to see if we can expedite that at the best, in the best possible way, and have it at least prepared for when another development proposal makes its way. Would that be also possible?
Ms. Grant?
Thank you. And through you, Councillor McLaren, do you mind just repeating the question? I just want to make sure that I heard it. Sorry.
So the biggest concern that people in the area have is that Fairfield Road should remain closed in the event that there's greater volumes generated as a result of future development. Would it be possible in the next term, very early on the next term, to be able to prepare for that possible eventuality so that a traffic light can be expeditiously installed?
I would perhaps, I see James, Mr. Barr has his mic on, but I think similar to your other questions, I think that would depend on what's being proposed in terms of the traffic flows and what makes sense from a technical perspective. I don't want to speculate on that at this time, but I will pass it over to Mr. Barr.
Mr. Barr?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillor McLaren's a great question, and all options are always on the table when a new development application comes forward and sites continue to build out. Through this specific application, we've definitely become aware of the concerns of the citizens in the area, as well as points that you have raised. So any development application that would come in the future, I think we would seek direct consultation with affected landowners and potentially neighbor areas if it is required, as well as yourself. And I believe the Sisters of Providence may also be doing an outreach campaign as it's happening right now. But yes, in the future, we would look to a collaborative process to move a next development application along.
And I'm very happy to hear that you said all options are on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. So now we'll go to the public. So I'd ask Ms. Fawcett if we have any hands up, and if we do, we'll turn to the public at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Through you, I will note that we still have 13 members of the public with us at this time. If you wish to speak to the current application, please raise your hand in Zoom so that we may develop a speakers list. And Mr. Chair, I do see that we've got 4 hands raised, so we'll begin with Andrew DeSantos.
Mr. DeSantos, if you could give us your address, and then you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Sure, this is Andrew DeSantos. I'm at 147 Fairview Road. Everyone can hear me okay? Perfect, thank you. I just want to first thank everyone who took part in this process at the planning committee level to find an alternative route and proposal so far, other than using Fairview Road for exit traffic. We really do appreciate it. It means the world to us. We're a really tight-knit community, and we're very fearful of having our street opened up for the many concerns that we raised on May 5th. And I won't rehash those, but I imagine some of my fellow community members will. I am concerned, however, that the new proposal is possibly opening up future reassessing of our road when it comes to additional requirements as population grows at 1200 Princess Street. We received reports from the city and received a note from a letter, I should say, from the CEO of Providence Village, which explicitly says that they will need to reassess for future phases. Understanding that development is almost undoubtedly, future development is almost undoubtedly to occur, I think it would be wise for us to plan in advance of that. And as a taxpayer, the thing I hate the most is seeing our money go to something that then has to be undone and redone. And so the concept of extending the median to restrict left-hand turns, which by the way is currently an option for people leaving 1200 Princess Street, to see that then have to be possibly undone to put in a traffic light years down the road doesn't make a lot of logical sense to me. And I understand that there's costs involved. There's also time required with respect to putting in a light, but I still don't understand why that's not the go-to. And I get that the traffic consultants did their studies based on current usage or projected usage of the current state, but why would we not look to the future as to what that site's going to end up looking like in, say, 5 or 10 years? And at the last meeting, we did hear explicitly from the planning committee staff that a traffic light would be too close to other lights. So we went and did our due diligence and we measured, And as the numbers state that I emailed in advance of this meeting, it wouldn't in fact be any closer than any of the, a number of the lights in our area. So I just really want to push for that out of the gate. I get that, again, the study was done to conclude and show based on current numbers, but it really, if you're looking at it from a taxpayer perspective, I'd hate to see us do something that in 3 years or 5 years, we're going to have to go and undo and then spend that money again. Anyhow, at the end of the day, for me, it's about our safety of our community and the best logical solution. And to me, that's a traffic light at 1200 Princess Street, doing a bunch of work now that we're probably going to have to undo when more people, end up moving into that area. Doesn't make any sense. And at the end of the day, we want to ensure this development moves forward. We're excited about it as a community, but not at the expense of our own safety and our own, community that we developed over the number of years of living here. So I'm hoping that planning committee and council members will continue to support our strong and vibrant community and ensuring we don't get what I feel like at this point is bullied into having our road opened up when a clear and obvious alternate solution is available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeSantis. Next.
Mr. Chair, next to speak is Amy Solk, followed by Benjamin Almeida.
Ms. Solk, if you can give us your address, and then you've got 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy, and I live at 215 Phillip Street. And I just want to thank everyone for hearing the concerns of our neighborhood from the May 5th meeting. And I guess my question is just, previously we were told that the wait time, if Fairview wasn't allowed, the wait time for the staff members leaving was going to be like 10 to 15 minutes. And so basically, does that remain now? Like that seems, is that just going to be an issue that the staff members are going to have to deal with? Or what's kind of happening that way? Because it doesn't seem like there's an alternative. And I just was wondering how that stands. That's all.
Thank you. We're going to answer all the questions once we've heard from all the speakers. So who would be Mr. Almeida? Sorry, your address, and then you've got 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Almeida, and I live at 137 Fairview Road. And I just want to start by saying thank you for listening to our concerns last meeting. And one of the concerns I have is, in that study, was the study only done on the proposed site, or was Peachtree Plaza also counted in the study, as people there would benefit from the light as well, because there's a high volume through there? And then kind of touching on what Andrew had mentioned previously, is to do all that work is going to impede traffic, which Princess is pretty busy, especially changing the median, whereas traffic light would be a lot less impediment of the traffic, as you'd only need those 2 outer lanes kind of closed for that. And as well, to help prevent from ever having to really open up our exit into the Providence area, to allow us to use a safer route, having lights there being one of the safest ways to get across traffic. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Almeida. And again, your question will be answered at the end. Ms. Fawcett?
Mr. Vice Chair, next to speak is Bill Duncan, followed by Sarah DeSantos.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duncan. Your address, and then you've got 5 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My address, 135 Fairview.
Go ahead.
And I just want to say thank you to the council for the last time hearing us and listening to us and caring what we had to say. On Hillendale, I don't think anybody mentioned, we have a big development going on, housing, and a lot of traffic there right now. And to turn on left is like, it's almost impossible because we got so much traffic. The councilman got them to stop bringing the trucks, the heavy trucks on that road for the building, which was nice. But we still got a lot of cars coming on that road. The construction cars alone blocks that road up. So if we had another way for cars to come through, we'd have a real jam. We'd have a lot of cars trying to get out of here at certain speeds, getting upset. You know how it is when everybody wants to finish at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, trying to get out to work and get onto the road. It's almost impossible. And another point I'd like to put is the price. They keep saying the the land is owned privately. Have they talked to the people that owns it? Who owns it? Can we find out? Is it possible for them to sell the land or for the city to buy the land? I think we should try to figure out another way other than destroying a community that's very tight. The nun said they wanted to leave a legacy. I don't think they want to break up a community as their legacy. And we are a community. We all care for one another. We all watch out for one another. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And next is Mr. Santos. Mr. Santos, I think we have your address, but your address, and then you've got 5 minutes.
Sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, thank you. Yes, 147 Fairview Road. Again, thank you very much to the council for listening to our concerns and deferring until now at the very least and coming up with a new plan. Something that has been bothering me since the last meeting is pedestrian traffic trying to come into 1200 Princess Street coming from the east. If someone was to take the bus, for example, and get off on Princess Street, they would either have to cross at the lights at Food Basics or at Princess and Sir John A, and then walk. And I'm assuming a number of the people that would be taking the bus are elderly people visiting the people in hospice care. That's a decent jaunt for someone a little bit older to have to do that. Having a light at 1200 Princess Street would help alleviate that a little bit. I'm not saying that, and then we might have to put a bus stop in there as well, but that's another issue. Again, I'm glad that Mr. Duncan raised the issue of the new development in our neighborhood as well, because there's a lot more traffic coming in already and the development is not even finished. When the people who move into that development on just off of Hillendale begin to live there, then there will be a lot more traffic. My son and daughter will both be catching the bus right on the corner of Portsmouth and Princess, Fairview and Hillendale. I apologize. It's still summer. I have 3 more days of school before school starts. They'll both be catching the bus right on the corner of Hillendale and Fairview Road. And it's a busy intersection in and of itself already with the new school, the French school that's already there. More traffic is just going to increase the risk already. And if there's more traffic coming out of Providence Village, then that's just even more of a nightmare. So as a mother, I am obviously concerned. And as a community member, because I love all of the children that are on this street. We are such a tight-knit community, just as many of us have already said. But I don't understand why a light hasn't really been evaluated. Why hasn't that been looked at more in depth? And because if future building in Providence Village happens, then a light is only going to make more sense. And I know traffic studies, and I'm not an expert in any means by that. That is not my forte, but we did the walk and we all walked it, and we saw that there's no difference between 1200 Princess Street and Sir John A. Macdonald and 1200 Princess Street and the Food Basics light, and the difference there between Sydenham and John Counter was very short. I don't see what the difference would be to put in a light there. Anyway, but I do appreciate council very much looking into other options so that our neighborhood can continue to be safe for a little while longer, at least. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. So I will turn it over to Ms. Grant to respond to those questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the public for coming to another meeting for this one. I know it's time commitment for people, so we appreciate that. I will perhaps start, and then I will pass it over to Ms. Viscaro to speak, I think, more specifically to the technical background related to the traffic light. And then if Ms. Wood from the consultant side would like to jump in and add anything, she's welcome to do so. So I think the first question was, why can't we install a light now if we know that we might potentially need one in the future, and doesn't it make sense to do all that work at once? I think that's a reasonable question. In terms of how the city evaluates site-specific development applications, upgrades to the road or servicing or anything like that to accommodate that development is developer funded. So it's not something that the city is proactively typically putting money into outside of like a master planning process or a larger transportation plan process. So for site-specific developments such as this, we're approving the upgrades that the development requires in order to function. So that is why the city is not putting extra money into a light at this stage, as it's not warranted at this time, and we don't know what the traffic volumes would be in order to construct an appropriate light for that. I'll leave the rest of that if Ms. Viscaro wants to add anything, but I will move on for now. I think the next question was related to wait times for the site and if those will be long, as are mentioned in the traffic report. And I think just to reiterate what was said before, the long wait times were related to allowing right and through movements from the site onto Princess Street, which is why the left turns and through movements onto Princess Street, which is why right turns are the only permitted movement from the site now. So the long wait times that were referenced in the traffic study wouldn't happen under the recommended approach for right out only. The reason Fairview Road was previously recommended as a complement to that right out only was to allow a western exit from the site rather than having people go Princess to Sir John A to Bath and throughout the city. So the wait times on the site from a traffic technical perspective are not a concern at this time. There was some questions about, I think, construction vehicles and other construction going on in the area. The applicant did confirm through the previous public meetings for the application that construction vehicles are intended to access the site from Princess Street, not from Fairview Road. So there shouldn't be any impacts to Fairview Road in that sense. And there were questions related to private ownership and if the city can go into talks with those owners. That's not something that the city is interested in doing at this stage, not part of our official plan at this point. So not something that we have considered for this site-specific development at this time. Those would be private property rights that those owners would speak among, come to agreements amongst themselves on. And I believe those are the responses I wanted to provide, and perhaps I will just pass it over to Ms. Viscaro to speak a little bit more on the technical aspects of the traffic light and why it is not warranted at this time.
Ms. Viscaro?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, as Ms. Grant noted, traffic signal at this location is not supported by the technical work that was completed for this development. It was evaluated based on the information that's available for this development at this time and would be subject to review for further developments under future traffic studies for any further changes on the site. I think there was a question as well about pedestrian access across the road and that consideration. So that is also considered and can be considered separately. If there are changes relative to use or warrants from a pedestrian access standpoint, that may also be considered by the city in the future. For pedestrian access specifically, we do have different considerations. Might be introducing a controlled pedestrian crossing, such as a signalized pedestrian crossing, not necessarily triggering a full traffic signal. Those items for pedestrian warrants and accesses to transit, those pieces are also looked at by the city along all of our transportation networks. So that might be something considered in the future as well.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is get a motion to get this on the floor, and then committee can have another run at this. Could I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. All right, it's on the floor for discussion and debate. Are there any questions from committee? I'm not seeing any, so therefore I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. Just going to the rest of the business items here. There are no motions. There's no notice of motions, no other business. The correspondence is as attached, and the date of our next meeting is Thursday, September 15th. If I haven't missed anything, Madam Clerk, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Anybody going to move that? Councillor Hutchison, second by Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.